All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the April meeting of the ITS committee. A couple of housekeeping notes. We did not have enough committee members who would be able to be present physically today. So in case you didn't realize to this point, we are 100% virtual today and officially do not have a quorum, which means that all of our action items will be delayed until July and our next meeting. So that said, let's go ahead and dive right into the agenda, and we'll start out with the public comment period. If there's anyone who has a comment that they would like to share, is there a hand raise function on this platform? Or Johnny, would you rather have them type something into the chat before
Yeah, I
speaking?
wasn't able to find the hand raise function either. I felt like I knew where it was before, but I couldn't find it yesterday. So if anyone's on here from the public and wants to say something, just type into the chat and we'll call on you.
We'll give that a few seconds. We don't typically have a lot of public comments, but with that technological barrier in place, we'll give you a few seconds just in case you need to type.
The hand raise is on the attendees tab, and it doesn't look like anybody's raised their hand.
Got it. We'll use either methodology. If you want to raise your hand or type something in the chat, we'll make sure to give you the microphone.
Nothing so far.
All right. Well, seeing none, and that being our typical response, we can move on to the next item, which is the review and not approval, but comment on minutes from last quarter's meeting. Since we don't have a quorum, we won't officially adopt them, but we can still accept any comments if everyone wants to give that a once over. Hopefully you were able to bring that up on the link that was sent out last week, so you can maybe have even taken a look individually. I did note, I'm looking real quick. I did note on the last page under C, it says Brian Campbell. So you might, it would be good to correct that. Thank you.
Where is that?
It's under, keep scrolling, under status reports.
Oh, status.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I assume that was you and not Brian Gentry.
Correct.
All right, got it. Yeah, we'll fix that. Thanks.
Any other comments on the minutes from the January meeting? All right, hearing none, we can continue. Let me pull up real quick. Next, we have action items, and again, with the lack of quorum, what we'll probably need to pivot and do at this point is to talk about it as a group as needed, and then if there are any messages to pass along to the board, we can do so. We just won't adopt any sort of formal statement as a group. And Megan, did you have something specific or a presentation to share with us on that?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Johnny, can you bring up the presentation, or can you, and I will go through the, oh, here it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
And
you can see my screen?
yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. I can't make it do full screen, otherwise this might freeze, so I hope that this is okay with the margins.
Yeah, the only thing, you might want to make it a little bit smaller so the whole slide shows up. I don't know, as we go through, we'll test it. So
Yeah, from Megan, from my end, I can see the whole slide and read it well. I would also add that if you have the video strip at the top, you can click and drag, make that a little bit smaller. If that helps anyone to get a little more visibility of those slides.
thank you. Yes, it does. Okay. I'm Megan Arasta. I'm the TISMO program engineer for Department of Transportation. Today, I would like to present to you the I-4 Florida's Regional Advanced Mobility Elements Project. And from now on, I refer to this project as I-4 Frame. My presentation, next slide, please. My presentation includes what the project is about, why the project is needed for our region, where the infrastructure is located, and how it will help with safety and mobility in the Tampa to Orlando region. And then I will share with you the latest schedule of design and construction. Next slide, please. What is the I-4 Frame project? As you know, our vision for Department of Transportation is to promote safety, mobility, and innovation. And the I-4 Frame is a connected vehicle and an ITS project. And the technologies which is associated with it will leverage vehicle to infrastructure and vehicle to vehicle technologies to reduce crashes and improve mobility. Next slide, please. Why do we need the I-4 Frame project? As we know, the I-4 corridor from the East Coast to the West Coast and from Tampa to Orlando, it is an artery for the economic activities. Also, we have 75 million visitors that visit Orlando, and they visited 75 million in 2018. Every day, 151,000 vehicles travel daily through this corridor. From looking at the crash data from 2016 to 2018, 45 fatal crashes and approximately 2,100 injury crashes were reported on I-4. And if any of these crashes result in a fatality, the roadway will be closed for approximately 4 hours for the homicide investigation. I-4 averages 2-lane closure events per day and 1 full directional closure every 11 days in 2018. So based on this, the crash history, and the congestion, it makes the travel time unreliable. So also it decreases the safety. So this is the reason why this project is so important. Next slide. Thank you. This is just a heat map that shows all the red locations are the locations of crashes. So as you can see, there are not many areas that we don't see a lot of red, so which causes a lot of the rear end collisions as well. And this visually tells us, you know, we need to improve this. We need to improve the safety and also the travel experience of the traveling public. Next slide, please. Where is the I-4 Frame project going to take place? It's going to be, as I said before, from Tampa to Orlando. It's going to include 77 miles on I-4 from Tampa to Orlando. It's going to be 200 miles of arterials, which is basically the surface streets between these areas. And it's going to communicate with 381 traffic signals. The project will be installing ATCs, RSUs, CCTV cameras, and Bluetooth detectors. And at key decision points along the diversion routes, which I will share with you in the next slide. Specific signals will also include vehicle detection, both radar and video, and blankout sign to help assist motorists at these decision points. Next slide, please. This slide shows all the projects that are associated with I-4 frame. There's a project in District 7, District 1, District 5, Turnpike, and the State Road 60 CAV project. In the middle, you see in the brown, this is the I-4, and this project encompasses 2 contracts. One contract is going to be the District 7 and the State Road 60 CAV contract, and the other contract is going to be the District 1, District 5, and the Turnpike. In District 7, it's going to include 25 miles of I-4, 80 miles of arterials, 30 miles of the State Road 60 CAV project, and 3 miles of the Turnpike. District 1, it's going to include 30 miles of I-4, 100 plus miles of arterial, and 24 miles of the Turnpike. And you can also see District 5 and also the Turnpike. As many of you know, the District 1 improvements will be managed out of the RTMC for District 7. And the reason I wanted to share District 5 and the Turnpike with you is, after all, this is a regional project, and there are many, many destinations within this region, you know, from the international airports, from universities, from Walt Disney, and many other destinations. Next slide, please. So again, this slide shows where the I-4 frame project is. And in this slide, what I like to share with you, there are a lot of colors on this slide, I understand, but what I want you to concentrate on as far as what's happening at District 7 is the area on the left. And what does this project do? The main concept and the main improvement as far as the safety and giving the traveling public alternatives in case there's a backup on I-4. So as I said before, the I-4 is the brown, and on the left side you can see there's a teal color that shows the primary diversion routes for I-4 backup, and that's Hillsborough Avenue, and it's in color teal. The secondary diversion route for District 7 is MLK, which is in dash teal line, and that is also in conjunction with State Road 60 as a secondary route, and which gives the traveling public alternatives during the congestion of I-4. During these incidents, what's important is that there are going to be signage, and it will give the traveler this alternative and an option that, okay, if you stay on I-4, it's going to take an hour and a half. If you choose, for instance, to use the diversion route on Hillsborough, it's going to be 30 minutes. So there's going to be plenty of signage that will give the traveler an idea of, what's the best way for them to choose to, get to their destination. On the middle section, you're going to see, obviously you see the red, which is the primary diversion routes for in District 1, and the dash ones are the secondary diversion routes for District 1. And then District 5 the same scenario, and it's shown in blue. I mentioned the fact that, you know, as I mentioned before, this project has 5 different plan sets, and at the end I will discuss and share with you the schedule of these projects. Next slide, please. Now, as far as how does the I-4 framework, many of you are all familiar with these terminologies. There's going to be, you know, the roadside units, the onboard units, and the detection devices. And the main function of the roadside units are to facilitate communication between vehicles and transportation infrastructure by transferring data over the detected short-range communication and the cellular vehicle to other transportation devices, the CV2X. The RSU gathers the basic safety message from the onboard units and other local traffic systems and communicates the data back to the RTMC. The information is analyzed and the traveler information message is broadcasted from the RSU to vehicle's OBU in order to provide the information to the motorist. Next slide, please. This just shows an overall District 7 project, and as an overall, the preliminary summary of the devices is that the roadside units, 264 CCTVs, 119 Bluetooth 20 blankout signs that are very important as far as giving information to the travelers as far as the distance and the alternate route and the timing. 125 of those ATC controllers, 81. And for this location, the wrong way driving ramps, we're adding 4 devices. RSUs will be installed at roughly 1 mile spacing along the limited access facilities, I-4, I-275, I-75, and we're going to use existing cameras or embeds poles to install them. On the arterials, the RSUs will be placed at all intersections, selected mid-block crossings, and emergency signals. At major destinations, as I mentioned before, you know, we're going to have the CCTVs, the Bluetooth detectors, videos, blankout signs, and the detection is being added so we can get automated traffic signal performance measures at these locations. The blankout signs will be the key element directing motorists which can and which diversion routes to follow. Also, the frame project will be coordinating with TIA, that they have the connected vehicle project, and the City of Tampa ATMS project. Next slide, please. So how does the I-4 frame work? And you know, which devices will be talking to each other, and what are the elements and what are the notifications that the travel will be getting. For instance, it will have the traffic incident management element, which would broadcast traffic incident information to vehicles, you know, about maintenance, about construction information, about evacuation routes. It will have the speed harmonization message system, which broadcasts vehicle speed advisories to warn drivers of reduced speed recommendations and based on the roadway condition ahead. And this is important because it gives them an idea that, you know, it's need to slow down, and this will hopefully minimize the rear-end collisions. The work zone traffic management, this is very important as far as the fact that we're in Florida. There are a lot of roadway construction going on, and to improve our roadways. So this broadcast information on back of queue, roadway hazard, roadway weather conditions, roadway surface conditions for construction projects. Freeway back of queue warning, broadcast vehicle stoppage to minimize or prevent rear end or other secondary collisions. For instance, you're coming around the curve and the traffic has stopped in front of you. It gives you that message that you need to slow down and potentially you have to stop. Wrong way driving, again, I mentioned that there are going to be devices that's going to be installed, but there are two ways that this will function. One is currently, as you know, we have a lot of wrong way driving incidents in Tampa Bay area, and we are adding by end of fiscal year 2022, early 23, we will, Department of Transportation have had the opportunity to add the wrong way driving devices to all of our off ramps. So let's say there is a vehicle that's going the wrong way. That vehicle, the OBU on the vehicle will be communicating with these devices, and it make the devices, the lights to flash, and so that it gives the driver hopefully an opportunity to turn around. So this is one scenario. The other thing is, if there is the other option is that that if there's a wrong way driver, if a car is wrong way driving, and it gives the other drivers the notice that there's a wrong way driver in the vicinity of where they are, and it gives those other drivers the option of, for instance, if there's an exit nearby, they can get off of the exit. This I4 frame also have freight management aspect, which is the broadcast traffic management information to freights. It also broadcasts availability in the rest areas. And the last is predictive analytics. And as we all know, this is very preliminary. And I think the City of Tampa ATMS project, by using the historical traffic information, is probably one of the first projects that's going to be able to provide this information. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there are two contracts. Contract number one, it will include the I-4 frame project in District 7 and State Road 60 CAV project. The design will be completed in November of 21 for both projects, and the contract will be let, and the contractor will be selected in February of 2022. Currently, these are the approximate budgets, 11.5 and 1.7 respectively for these two projects. The second project, the second contract will include District 1, District 5, and the FTE portion of the I-4 frame. The design will be completed in March of 2022. The contractor will be on board in July of 2022, and the approximate budget is 9.3, 3.7, and 1 million respectively for those projects. Next slide, please. The department has already obviously has selected the consultant. The consultant who has been working on this project is Metric Engineering. As I mentioned, Dale Cody is also on this call for any questions regarding to the project. Design completion, as I mentioned, November 2021 for the 7 portion, and the rest in March of 2022. The construction to begin for the 7 will be June of 2022, and for the rest of the project, October of 2022. And that's the end of my presentation. This one we don't have to use, I just put it there for information, but I think we can leave it out.
All right, thank you, Megan. Were there any questions for Megan?
Yes,
Megan, I had a, yeah, go ahead, Achilles.
I just wanted to ask, what was the number of the OBUs that are going to be participating?
The number of onboard, well, the OBUs are going to be, actually, thank you for your question. The OBUs are going to be implemented, it's going to be part of the new car manufacturer devices that they have. For instance, Ford is, they're coming out with cars in 2022, and they would have the OBUs on there. Right now, obviously the OBUs are not going to be part of this project, because the OBUs are going to be part of the, there's going to be what each of us make a decision whether we're going to buy the small unit to include in our cars, until the day that we make a decision that we're going to change our car to a newer version. In my mind, these kind of reminds me as how, the last 10-15 years we have gone through our TVs and the high definition TVs and the boxes that we used to have. And so there is no OBUs unless each of us as citizens decide to buy that and use that in our cars. Dale, are you here?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Can you answer that question also, and if there are any other alternatives that we're looking at for the OBUs?
Sure, absolutely. So in addition to what Megan said, the other reality is that there's probably going to be some small deployment of OBUs. We have in the, like, to freight, for instance, I know the freight coordinator in District 7 is looking potentially at that. There's just no, and there's conversation between Megan's group and central office to go ahead and do it, but it would be a separate deployment. The department, as a general rule, has gotten away from furnishing on projects. And I'm sure we all remember back in the day, you get ATMS software sometimes from an ATMS project, right? And you probably noticed that a lot of times those procurements now are separate, and that's a big reason. So it is being investigated, but it would be a minimal deployment, and it would be selected based on what makes sense. In other words, if we're testing EVP, maybe it needs to go to some fire trucks. If we're testing TSP, obviously we would go to buses. If we're testing freight, we'd partner with a freight company.
Okay, thank you.
I'd say I had a question related to that, and maybe not even specific to this project, but does FDOT have an overall strategy for leveraging the investments that we've put into our transportation system here to try to influence the market in any sort of deliberate way? And if so, what does that look like? Are we engaging directly with vehicle manufacturers and saying, here, this is what you can expect to experience in Florida if you will make the commitment to investing in the original equipment, and that obviously creates the opportunity for you to market that to your end user. And maybe that's a question that no one on the call really has a thorough answer on, but I was curious if there's any awareness of leveraging what we've done to try to direct or influence the market.
I'll start, and then Dale is very knowledgeable about other districts. So the only project that I know is that I know District 5 is working with Ford with regards to this, and the onboard units, but that's all the information that I have. And that, I don't believe that project is, I know they have the dialogue, they have started the dialogue, but I'm not sure if that has, it's just in the infancy of that. So Dale, go ahead.
Sure. So let's start big, right? The federal government has been marketing and coordinating with Michigan and foreign manufacturers for literally decades. That's kind of how we landed on DSRC to start. And to be perfectly honest, that's why CV to X is starting to come into play, right? Because Ford has basically said, nope, this is what we're doing. Ford is looking to roll out in 2022 as a part of the US 41 frame project, which is kind of a sister project to this project. We were actually tasked with reaching out to the manufacturers and not the suppliers, but the actual people selling the cars. So I dutifully called them up, and I was dutifully told they were in the middle of selling a car. They thought that I was there to give them registration, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. So we made a little note to ourselves that around September of this year, when their cars roll out and have a bunch of gizmos and gadgets, they have no idea what they're looking at. That would be a really good time for us to roll in and say, by the way, if you want, there's a deployment on 41, there's a deployment on I-4 for us to go ahead and do that. So basically what you've got is you've got more of a national effort. You do have a statewide effort out of Tallahassee as well. And you even have a district effort to try to incorporate the local sales folks as they're selling cars, because ultimately it's awareness at this point. You know, just letting people know if we're going to instrument a road, we need to let them know it's there, so that there's some excitement and some anticipation that, hey, it's worth spending maybe a little extra money for this equipment.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a couple of questions if I can. Was this part of the ATC MTD? Is that where this project is coming from?
Yes, sir.
We collaborated on that, and full disclosure, I can't remember all the details because it was quite a while ago, but I think we included PED detection and ramp metering as some of the other ICM strategies. Were those not able to be included in this due to the scope of the project, or are those things to consider at a later time?
There's going to be 2 or 3 PED detection areas, more along the lines of, you know, kind of a test case type of situation. Obviously, we're choosing locations where there's a good reason to have it there. As far as ramp metering was not ultimately included in the scope of the project.
And Johnny, if I may, as far as ramp metering, that's what our planning group is right now, looking at the ramp metering for the TBN projects, and then that will be translated later to we'll make a decision as far as what needs to be included in the concept plans for the TBN projects.
Yeah, and if you think about it, on the ramp metering side, if probably right now, detection, well, assuming you're going to do it automated, not manually, right now detection probably makes sense, going ahead and doing in-ground or overhead detection, because, we have a relatively low we have a very low saturation rate of OBUs, right? So we wouldn't want somebody not actually getting the ability to move forward on a ramp because of that. So, there's going to be a transition. Like, I think Megan did a great job of explaining that this is not 100% CV. Like, especially the critical activities, like wrong way driving is a great example. Wrong way driving has a traditional ITS system that will be there in addition to the CV system, which will be like TIM messages to the car and things like that. But it's a recognition by the department that we are in a transition right now. Megan used the really cool example of when we transitioned from an analog TV to a digital TV back in the early 2000s, right? So we're in that transition period. So what we want to do is number one, we want to take advantage of that period, but we also need to recognize that if we have an immediate need, then we need to utilize technology where there's an immediate benefit, even if it is a secondary technology to the CV technology over time.
Okay, thanks for that, by the way. My second question was, in the beginning of the presentation, I saw the slide about incidents and congestion. I assume that we have metrics pertaining to, well, evaluation metrics regarding like clearance time and other things. Are there any other metrics that the feds are particularly interested in? Because I kind of see this as like a proof of concept for ICM at this magnitude. What are the feds really looking at to determine whether or not this has been a success?
Megan, would you like me to go?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Johnny, what we've got is we're utilizing performance measurement, right? So obviously travel time is part of it. Travel time reliability is actually a huge part of it because it kind of rolls up everything. Crash history, there's certainly some environmental stuff in there. Basically, I would say there's 10 to 12 performance measures that are going to be utilized. I mean, some of it's pretty simple with regards to, you know, number of times that the system is used, number of times that a unit pairs, right, with an OBU, you know, things like that. But if you're talking strictly about transportation, the big ones are travel time reliability, crashes, and then you can tie that to travel time index, you know, planning time index, and a bunch of terms that frankly just confuse the heck out of non-engineers. So, but really, and then travel time by time of day, and hopefully as we get into predictive analytics, now we can start to combine it. And this is when it gets exciting. You know, what do we think the road's going to look like when it's mid-February, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it starts to rain? You know, we'll have historical data that'll say we are likely to have a crash in this particular area, and now we can go ahead and start to do some things like that. And that, although predictive analytics is not directly a part of I4 Frame, it does tie directly to 3 predictive analytic deployments that are occurring within the region.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you, Megan. I will say from the city's perspective, we're really looking forward to seeing this project complete, as well as to see how we can leverage it and the combination of multiple projects that are related in our area, really to serve our citizens better. And you've done a great job of presenting the case and talking about what the approach is, and we're looking forward to results. So with that, I think Vishaka was going to talk to us about the tip amendment related to this project for the MPO, and I will hand it over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, committee members. This is Vishaka Shivaraman, MPO staff. I will be requesting this tip amendment approval from this board, but I'm also wondering if, since we don't have a quorum, if we can go with the approval. Megan has probably gone over all the slides, and I will just bring up my slide for the comparative report. Johnny, can you please open slide 3?
This one?
Yes, please. This is just a comparative report, as you can see here. These are the numbers, and as you can see, just requesting an approval for this tip amendment. It's a new project, and it is going to the board next week, and it's for 14.5 million. So if we can get your approval for this, I don't know if there's anything else required from me at this time.
Okay, thank you. Since you were correct in that since we don't have a quorum and we're not face-to-face, we can't recommend approval as a board, but Johnny had mentioned to me that we can still discuss it and pass along comments as appropriate. So let's go ahead and open up the floor to any comments that any of the board members would like to share.
Sure, thank you.
And maybe if there's no messages to pass forward, maybe a statement along the lines of, if we were able to take action on this, we would have supported it.
All right, I think it's okay. Let's do this then. Passing along the message that in the absence of a quorum, we are unable to recommend as a board approval. However, we would anticipate making said recommendation when we're officially able to do so. Does that adequately speak for the board members present?
I think so.
I think
Okay.
so.
I did not suspect any opposition to that.
Okay.
So thank you all, and thank you, Vishaka. And with that, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is, well, actually, I'll say was
Sorry.
going to be our in-roadway lighting presentation. We had a little bit of a scheduling snafu on that, and it's going to be tabled until our July meeting. And we can look forward to hearing all about that. I have heard that it's a compelling presentation and that should hold our interest well, but we won't be hearing it today. So with that, I will turn it over to Dan Budens to talk about the regional ITS architecture update.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, everybody on the call. I don't know if I can promise a compelling presentation, but I certainly can promise that it will be informative. I'm Dan Budens. I'm the ITS operations manager here at FDOT at the Tampa Bay SunGuide Center. I'm going to present to you guys the regional ITS architecture update. Let's go ahead and just hop into it. Next slide, please. So in today's presentation, I'm going to cover the update that was done in 2020, but I want to introduce what the project was about, what a RITSA update really is, what is ITS architecture, why it's important, and how it's used. So next slide, please. So just to introduce the project, the RITSA update was put out to bid by the central office, and the consultant hired was Iteris. The work was scheduled to begin in 2020, and the team was selected at the tail end of 2019, and it involved a stakeholders workshop, which was one of the very beginning activities to accomplish, and that was completed in February of 2020. Previously, the RITSA, or Regional ITS Architecture, RITSA is an acronym if I didn't cover that, it was updated in 2016 by a firm called Consistech. So taken over by Iteris in 2020, hired out by the central office. Next slide, please. So just to give you a brief overview of the RITSA update, the Florida ITS architecture is, we have sort of a statewide architecture, and then it's further broken down into different regions of the state. And there's basically 6 regions that are composed of the FDOT districts. District 6 and District 4, which are down in the southwest portion of Florida, or I'm sorry, southeast, they're combined as one region. I think that they have enough characteristics and elements that those were combined as one whole RITSA for that area. Basically, the RITSA gathers several different pieces of information and input from stakeholders about upcoming ITS projects, and then it assembles them into a statewide architecture, or primarily first a regional architecture. The update is usually done every 10 years, but as I said, it was last done in 2016 and picked back up in 2020. I think as technology evolves more rapidly, we're going to shorten that update cycle. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to give you some idea of what Iteris was contracted to do, first step was to review the existing architecture, and then, like I said, they conducted stakeholder meetings to gather different inputs. And once they first introduced what it is that they were looking for to the stakeholders, they conducted a more focused stakeholder workshop to broaden information gathering. And then they performed major updates to the architecture and documented everything in extensive reports and assembled all of that into a ITS architecture website, which I'll share the link to later on in one of the slides, and I'm certain that this slideshow will be available to anybody in the audience, which has a hyperlink to that website. And just to give you some idea about housekeeping, the RITSA will go through an annual update in June of 2020, and they're going to, in that update, just do a review of all of the different information that's been presented, and then update anything necessary. Basically, it introduces new planned projects and projects that are coming down the pipeline, and as those projects get completed, they basically come back off of the RITSA. So it's kind of forward thinking, or what's coming next is kind of the way that the RITSA should be kind of conceptualized. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of what some components are of architecture, or the way that the RITSA went, is, primarily we listen to and get information from the stakeholders, which is composed of different local agencies, state agencies, different elements or entities in or around a region that are going to be having ITS projects. So those stakeholders then identify inventory elements or systems, or otherwise known as transportation systems, and then those systems generally are assemble or parts of projects, and those projects usually offer services. So we've got stakeholders identifying elements or systems, and then the services that those elements provide. And then they looked at all the different agreements between the agencies, and they cataloged and sort of put all those into the repository of the RITSA website. They took operational concepts or concepts of operations. If you've heard the buzzword ConOps, ConOps is basically just a descriptional or a narrative document that describes what a project is going to offer, who the stakeholders are, how it's going to work and interface with different agencies, what it's going to offer to the public. And then we also sought out standards and specifications, and all the while trying to adhere to FHWA guidelines that FDOT had adopted, and those can be considered as requirements. And those are, I'll get into that here in another couple of slides. Next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of some of the principal changes to the District 7 RITSA, it looked at and inventoried all of the different elements in the ITS systems, and those elements were revised, either added or omitted, depending on if they were completed or not. And just to give you some different examples of some of the elements, kind of think about like the autonomous shuttle vehicle as part of HART's Downtown Tampa Autonomous Transit Project, or City of Tampa's police dispatch as part of the city's ATMS expansion, or possibly FDOT's wrong way detection systems as part of the wrong way detection off-ramp expansion project. Next slide, please. Just to give you another example or two, Hillsborough County MPO Transportation Data Analytics System as part of the county's MPO Data and Analytics Platform, or PSTA's Intermodal Center as part of PSTA's Intermodal Center project. So those are some examples of elements. Next slide. And then, so I said the elements sort of provide services, and the services are pretty much data package exchanges between the elements. And so this update cycle added over 125 new services, but when the ITERIS team looked at everything, they noticed a lot of multiple instances, such as, for example, parking space management is sort of a new title. The city may have a parking management program in or around a stadium. The county may have their own parking management. Pinellas County may have their own parking management for some of the different attractions that they have. So there was some overlap in some of the titles, but the takeaway is that there was 125 new services identified. Next slide. So then continuing on with the principal changes, some projects were identified. So again, the projects are integrated, and as they're completed or deployed, they come back out of the RITSA. There was 56 new projects identified when all the stakeholders were interviewed and presented their projects in those workshops. And Some of those include like District 7's Gateway Expressway project, or the Howard Franklin Bridge construction from FDOT, or HART's Downtown Autonomous Transit, or Pinellas County's Traffic Management Center upgrades. I think I have another slide of some other examples if you go to the next one, Johnny. So yeah, so then there's, you know, in others, more examples of these, some of the projects are FDOT's truck parking availability, freeway DMS upgrades, Hernando County detection deployments, or Diaz connected vehicle projects. These are just some of the different projects that are out there. Those projects, again, are composed of elements that provide services that tie the different stakeholders together. And we'll get into that. We have sort of an example of architecture in another couple slides. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the District 7 RITSA website, here's a link to the website. You guys don't have to scramble to jot this down. I'm sure the slideshow will be shared with anybody. But this website's a wealth of knowledge. It includes different tabs here up at the top that identify the stakeholders, some of the services that were identified. So all of the agreements between the agencies can be found here. A listing of the projects can be found here, and the resource tab has several other things within it, such as like change request forms, and like if you had a new project you wanted to present, you could find the change request form there, fill that out, and I'll cover that in another slide later. But anyway, the website, it looks like this. This is the district's website, and you can go further to look at the rest of the state if you were so interested. Next slide. So what are some of the impacts of the RITSA? So again, it reflects all the latest ITS deployment and plans. So it sort of catalogs and tracks all of these planned things that are coming down the pipeline for the future. It provides baseline framework, and it's going to help the planners from the different agencies and stakeholders to identify what elements their counterparts are working on, how those connections between agencies work, what those workflows look like. And, you know, it supports a discussion of ITS solutions and transportation issues. It enables new project definitions based on current and planned ITS. It maps systems interfaces to applicable ITS standards. And all the while, everything is falling in line with FHWA's Rule 940, which says that an architecture is required for an ITS project, and it needs to also adhere to a systems engineering type of approach or development process. So that's how we're maintaining and staying within regulation. Next slide. So what is the ITS architecture? What does it look like? So on the right side, I sort of have a layout of some of the elements and then some of the services that tie between them. And don't strain your eyes trying to read this. I've got a more zoomed in one that I'll go over. It should really make it clear to everybody what this, what the architecture looks like and how this graphical representation is very meaningful. It takes physical objects like transportation systems and vehicles, and it shares or it shows the information exchanges between those two, or the interfaces between. It also presents the services that the different elements provide, and it's used as a reference for describing ITS or describing a vision of a project and who would benefit from it, and who would be you know, a counterpart that's necessary for the success of it. Let's go on to the next slide. So we're talking about regional architecture, and it's a regional framework. It's, you know, supports our institutional agreements and technical integration for ITS implementation, but it's based on a national architecture. And the buzzword for the national architecture is called ARCIT. And ARCIT is sort of a generalized framework that is sort of a guideline put out by FHWA. And then in regional architecture, much more of the local elements are identified in those services in between. If we go to the next slide, I'll show you what I mean. So looking here, this is part of the ARCIT national architecture. So this is the generalized format. So looking at this big blue box in the very center, that represents a traffic management center. Just the box above it is the staff within. There's, you know, camera operators or traffic operators, and they're receiving and exchanging information about the roadway. And you look to the right and you see these yellow or sort of tan boxes. And this is the roadway equipment. So the TMC has staff within it that interface with roadway equipment that may interface with other ITS roadway equipment. And basically, all of this is pushing out information to vehicles or to drivers. And then you look at the other left side of the diagram. You know, still that heart of the system is the traffic management center, and then just going from top to bottom, they're pushing out traffic images and traffic information to the media. They're interfacing with emergency management. They're interfacing with transit management centers, maybe exchanging traffic information or traffic images. Maintenance and construction activities are also funneled, and that information about when those projects are or what they're going to impact the road is funneled through the traffic management center and then disseminated out to the drivers or to the media and so forth. So this is the ARCIT. This is the general sort of template for the workflow and what the architecture should look like. And then we can get into the next slide, which gives you a more granular example of a regional architecture. So here we've got, this example is like the HART transit vehicles. So the HART transit vehicles are cruising along, they're using the roadway network. They may communicate with traffic signals and try to use preemption and take signal priority to move the bus. And that call out goes out to the field equipment, and that field equipment is tied back to the traffic management center. And that traffic management center may also receive calls from the fire rescue, who also may preempt a signal. And all the while, those services are tied back to field equipment that's going to actually change the signal. And it's all tied back to the TMC. So we've got some human element oversight over some of this. And this is just more of a realistic example of the architecture. So just for that one example of emergency vehicles interfacing with roadside equipment, or transit vehicles interfacing with the equipment in the TMCs, is just sort of a realistic example of the architecture. And you can see that there's many services, there's many stakeholders or elements, and all of the while, you know, a project is assembled, and this tool would really help us all to identify, you know, who needs to be connected to this, who needs to be notified of this, who do we need to make sure we have physical connections, communication lines. That's how the architecture works, and that's how it's really a helpful tool for planners and project designers. Next slide. So why is it important? So as I said maybe a few times, it supports regional and statewide coordination regarding technology and data projects. It identifies interconnectivity amongst various transportation and modal plans within the state, facilitates the ability of jurisdictions to operate collaboratively and harness the benefits of a regional approach. And all the while it adheres to the federal regulations. So everything is assembled, you know, using a systems engineering approach. So you first identify the needs with the stakeholders, then you come up with the concept of operations, describing the project and so forth. This isn't a presentation on systems engineering, but I think most of the audience is familiar, so we can just go to the next slide. So again, why is the architecture important? It captures and documents agreements between the stakeholders about their visions, and builds a framework around which ITS will be implemented in a region, and establishes reference for all the stakeholders regarding ITS, identifies interconnectivity among the regional transportation and modal plans, and facilitates the stakeholders' collaboration and ability to harness and get benefits of a regional approach to the transportation challenges. Perfect example, City of Tampa ATMS, and we're co-locating a lot of fiber and existing conduits, and you know, having a deep understanding of that existing architecture really helped probably facilitate and streamline the project. Next slide. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, it's strong and important for integration and coordination. You know, the connected and autonomous vehicle technology is a part of ITS. It's not fully developed yet, but it's certainly right around the corner. And having a deeper understanding of all of the ITS elements and infrastructure and connections is really going to be key to deploying that connected autonomous vehicle program in the region. Next slide. So again, covering some more of the benefits. So it's mostly used for planning. It answers the questions of what ITS do we have? What ITS do we plan to have? How are we going to integrate that? How are we going to tie that in to the different parts of the region? And it gives you a regional view of information sharing opportunities. So a lot of times an agency may only focus on their stuff, kind of having a narrow view. Being a participant in an architecture setup like this really brings to light what your counterparts and stakeholders all have available. And it really sort of breeds collaboration and you know, we're all here to work together perceptionally, or, you know, we're seen by the public as one government. So if we can all move in the same direction and, you know, complement each other with the deployments that we've already done, I think we're going to better serve the region, Tampa Bay as a whole. And so next slide. So just to continue on some of the benefits, it keeps us in compliance with systems engineering so that we can put a project out correctly. We don't overlook anything. And when it's followed, it addresses compliance with federal regulations. Again, that says we have to have an architecture, and then we have to use systems engineering to ensure that we put the project out correctly. And let's see. I think I covered that. Okay, next slide, please, Johnny. Okay, so how is it used? So when you're planning ITS, you want to gain a consensus among the stakeholders about what's out there, what they're planning, and it kind of eliminates any duplication of work. And you can build something that complements your counterparts' projects. When it comes to project development, RITSA projects provide project architecture satisfying federal and highway or FHWA regulations. And for undefined projects, you can use a software tool called RADIT. And that's called, the RADIT is another acronym. It stands for Regional Architecture Development for Intelligent Transportation. So if you don't really know what your project requirements are, you can go into this RADIT platform and you can start using some of the drill down types of questions that it asks you. And you can almost sort of develop a project or a plan using that software. And it seems like it's a helpful tool if you don't know where to begin. Next slide. Okay, so when you're using the architecture or the RITSA website, you can go there, you can go into the resources tab, you can find all kinds of different information. The complete report for the major update that we did in 2020 can be found there. The RADIT software tool can be found there that I just mentioned. It also has the change request form that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, and it also has other planning reference materials. So if you don't really know where to start, hop onto the website, check it out, check out the resources webpage, and then you know, you can also reach out to ITERIS who can help to develop a project or to ensure that we're following or your project fits into the architecture. And go to the next slide if you could. So, so here is a picture of the change request form. And, you know, if I don't know, Johnny, I was gonna, if I was presenting, I would sort of zoom in on this just for the audience. Do you mind trying to zoom into that a little? I hope I don't cause any technical difficulties. Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, so what you want to do when submitting this form is identify if you have a financial project ID number, put that there, identify what your agency is, put as much contact information as you can because they will be reaching back out to you. Identify which part of the region is going to be affected by this project. Any proposed changes you want to describe, you want to also put as much detail about the proposed changes as you can. You justify your rationale for why you want to make the change. Identify any additional stakeholders. And again, if you put good contact information, they'll be reaching back out to you to say, hey, did you consider these guys? Or, you know, they'll walk you through. Also, you want to put any additional information you have. I mean, go as far as you can with putting in good descriptions. And then if you have any concept development or concept plans or other documentation, a con ops or something, you can list those attachments and you can send those over as well. So this form is sort of the first step to getting your project rolled into the RITSA, and it's easy to use, it's easy to access, it's all there on the resources website. And if you really have trouble, ITERIS is there to help. So, and that's all worked out through the FDOT central office. So submitting a half-completed form, if you don't know where to go, you can certainly reach out for more help. Next slide. Okay, so one more time, here's the link to the website. The website is rich with all kinds of different information. It's got, like I said, it's got examples of projects. It's got who are your local stakeholders. It's got the agreements between the agencies. So if you want examples of agreements, this thing is a wealth of knowledge. So I encourage you all to check it out. If you're not already a participant in or a stakeholder who participated in the last update, I encourage you to try to be part of the next one. And that maintenance cycle, again, is going to be in June of 21. Next slide. Okay, well, here's my contact information. So if you had any more questions about it, or you wanted to try to see if I could sort of help out in any way, I'd be happy to field some questions. Or if you need to, here's my contact information. So if when the slideshow is distributed, if you want to reach out, please feel free to do so. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Were there any questions or comments for Dan? I had a quick one, Dan. On the change request form, how regularly are you receiving and processing them? I just was kind of curious what the volume of the maintenance effort is in between planned more major updates.
That's a great question that I do not have the answer to. So I was not the project lead on this. Again, this was let through central office. I can certainly look into it, Brandon, and circle back and get you that information, but I don't have that today.
Okay, no rush. I was just kind of curious, just getting a more of an order of magnitude level understanding of what the effort is like keeping this up to date. And I guess I presume that whatever the answer is on what the existing number of changes you get requested, probably the desired level is more, so that those planned updates are less reactive to things that maybe have taken place and more proactive in planning things that should take place. If I understand the whole process, ideally there would be more continuous changes as needed, and that would help keep it up to date.
Yeah, and I would venture to say that, as the cycle is done, it was done in 2016 and then again in 2020, and we had 56 new projects identified. I don't know the extent of ITERIS's reach. I think they really tried to reach everybody in the region. So I don't know if I could venture a guess, maybe I'd guess a dozen a year, maybe. But I'll certainly look into it and get back to you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, James.
Oh, my name is James. I work at central office, and I do have the ITERIS contract, the project manager for that contract. I do have the email address that you would submit the change request form to. I've received one change request form this year so far, and I've received, I think, 3 requests on how do you fill this out. So I guess so far I can expect maybe 4. Let's see here. We do have a backlog of approximately 80 projects in the queue to be input during this year's, I guess, maintenance interval. And that is because District 5 had a lot of projects that we just couldn't get to enter during the update. So they have about 60 projects that we have in queue that need to go in. The SITSA has, I think, 20. And then the one request that we did get so far is already in the SITSA, so that they were just, I guess, they couldn't find it, so they submitted a change request form. And then we'll have to get back to them and say, yes, it was entered, but we haven't gotten to the maintenance period yet. If you do have questions, the Federal Highways does have a very long Radit tool training that's computer-based, so you can do that as your schedule permits, and it is on the version 9. Our update for the state of Florida, we did it on the 8.3 version of Radit, so we're already out of date. They released version 9 in November. So one thing I've learned so far is you can't have version 8.3 and version 9 on your computer at the same time, because when you load up version 9, it overwrites 8.3. So I can't open up the 8.3s and make any changes without messing everything up. So just, but the 8.3 version is on the state FDOT's website, so you do have that archived, so you can load that on your machine and use all the architectures, the Radit tool with any architecture in the state. But if you do open it up in the 9, it will try and get you to convert it. So.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Dan or James?
I think Johnny might
Question.
have one. Yeah.
Dan, was there any effort to map the extent or the boundaries of the ITS projects that were submitted? I'm asking because sometimes when we do sub-area plans or corridor plans, either our staff or the consultants will try to locate any plans or projects that are anticipated to have an effect on the corridor in the future. And it seems quite common that they omit the tech elements that might be either out on the corridor already or planned. And I think that is because maybe those plans reside in a different part of the like local government. So like, you know, a planning study for us would be easier to find than an ITS engineering diagram. You know what I'm saying? So if all of these ITS projects were centralized in a location that's easily visible, that might help us.
Yeah, I hear you. I wonder if James has any feedback on that question. I do know that these, you know, as these projects are completed, they're sort of moved out of the architecture, which kind of bakes in what you're describing. I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, but I suspect too that maybe some of this ITS stuff may be somewhat protected.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how to answer that question. I wonder if James is still on the line.
If not, just a suggestion for how to improve, because you know, my role here is to do the TISMO oriented planning, and sometimes our staff will come to me and ask, hey, do you know about this project? And if it was constructed before I got here, I may not know anything about it at all.
Yeah, James, do you have some feedback on that, on sort of existing infrastructure and, you know, as-built plans for stuff that already exists and how that's incorporated for this forward look, but it's important to also look back to see what's already there. Does that capture it, Johnny?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, I started in October here at FDOT, so I don't have the greatest amount of knowledge, but my dealings with the Radit tool, there is no mapping tool, I guess, for entering the geographic location of where items or anything are. But it does have in there when a project is built, it does, I think, get stored in the tool. So at least a description and the players and the roles and responsibilities and the relationships should be in there. So at least you'd have with the roles and responsibilities, you should have a start of a breadcrumb trail of where to go look for the as-builts. because that stuff, that project information should be stored in the tool. Historic.
I'll spend a little bit of time playing around with the Reddit tool and maybe contact one of you all if I can't figure it out.
Yeah, that sounds good, Johnny. I was just thinking too, you know, we've got a couple of resources, poster size maps of where our ITS fiber is and where our camera deployment cabinets are, DMS signs, all the ITS infrastructure along the interstate is very well identified. I mean, I'd be happy to share that stuff with you, at least as a starting point. And then maybe I think I would just encourage you to maybe work with us a little when it comes to that next one, so that we can sort of bounce our resources off each other and see if those questions that you or your team have can easily be answered by some of the stuff we've got.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, James and Dan.
My pleasure. Any more questions from the audience?
All right, thank you, Dan. We appreciate it. Let's move to the next portion of the agenda, which is old business and new business. And we don't have anything on the agenda, so if there are any items to be brought up by the team, now's your opportunity to bring them up.
I wanted to give an announcement. So we saw the presentation from Vishaka earlier today. I am having her shadow me as the ITS liaison. I'm hoping to turn this responsibility over to her in 2022. She's interested in the topic and she's a quick study. So I'm hoping that she can pick this up and make the ITS committee even better than the condition that she's inheriting it in, and hopefully like expand the scope as well. There's so much going on, and we know that there's a critical need for a group of folks like this to get together, and I'm excited for her to take it over next year.
Well, Johnny, we really appreciated your leadership and your filling of the role of that liaison position. And so just on behalf of the committee, thank you for what you've done and what you will continue to do as that transition is made. And Vishaka, welcome to the team. We're looking forward to getting to know you better, and we're glad you're here.
Thank you to all of you, and thank you for Johnny for instilling the interest in this group. So I'm really excited.
Were there any other comments? Anything else to be shared with the committee? I had a couple of things. Johnny had actually gotten in touch with me earlier, and I don't know that we talked too much about this at the very beginning, but Brian McCarthy is on today, and he's going to be the new primary representative for Temple Terrace, but Troy Tinch is going to stay on our list as the alternate. So I just wanted to say welcome, Brian, and we'll look forward to having you on more regularly. And one last thing that I noticed, Johnny, I saw that there were 5 different addendums, but on the link that was sent out, the last 3 were not attached. So I didn't know if that was something that you could send out on a separate email, or if that's something to just plan to append to the next committee agenda. But I just
Sure.
I noticed I didn't see those, at least on that initial link.
I think these are hyperlinked, so I'll pull it open right now, see if I can. Sometimes when we email them out through constant contact, the links get broken. So I'll just send out the links in an email to everyone in case you can't access it on the agenda.
That works. Yeah, whenever I scroll over the links to documents within the chain in the PDF, it works, but it doesn't appear that any of those last 3 links are active whenever I look at
Gotcha.
it.
Yeah, sorry about
So
that.
that's all right. So I guess with that, we will adjourn, and thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon. We'll see you in 3 months.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.